So Dewey and Jean meet up in Los Angeles, at a bar, of course. Isn't that where they always meet? I knew this was gonna be fun. With guys sitting on instruments in back, you know what I mean? And they pulled this job, and I'm not gonna tell you anything about it, you have to buy the book and read. Thank you, Jerry. And so there are a couple other things that happened that I can't tell you about. Ruin the surprise, of course. So they planned to meet out at a rendezvous spot in the isolated California desert. And I don't know how many people have been to California desert, but it is isolated. The book takes place in about 1992, after LeChance has grown up, obviously. And he has to flee France and go to the United States, and I'm not going to tell you why. So he audience participation, I love it! So anyway, he's going to the rendezvous at this point in time, very isolated, expecting to meet up with Dewey. Okay? Chapter 3, The Rendezvous. The Chevy Caprice crept down the rough dirt track for nearly a mile, an endless drive with the poor condition of the road. Ominous dark clouds had begun to gather in the western sky. Suddenly, around a corner, a derelict two-story house appeared at the road's end. No vehicle was in sight. Except for a few chickens scratching around the steps, the house looked deserted. LeChance stopped the car and assessed the situation. He glanced over to the Glock for reassurance. Dusty streaks on the windshield exaggerated the destitute condition of the house. He drummed heavily on the steering wheel with his index fingers, aware that the car was in full view. Suddenly, a young boy rounded the edge of the house. Suddenly, a young boy rounded the left side of the house, clutching a small gauge rifle in one hand. He took one look at the car, yelled something LeChance couldn't hear, pounded up the wooden steps, and disappeared inside the front door. The man sat still, ready for just about anything. A young woman appeared behind the screen door. Her right hand held a butcher knife, which gave her a violent appearance that was oddly offset by a flowered ruffle on her apron. She came out and stopped on the top step of the porch, her eyes never leaving the car and its sole occupant. One by one, 3 young children appeared and stood sheltered behind her legs. The oldest boy still gripped the rifle in his right hand. The car had stopped within shouting distance of the house. Though the situation presented no immediate danger, LeChance picked the gun off the seat and slid it down into his waistband. He wanted to be ready. He pushed on the heavy car door, which gave a loud groan. Thank you. His large boot landed softly on the dust in the road. Nobody on the porch moved. Muted clucking filled the expectant silence between car and house. "Can I help you?" the woman shouted, guarding the children with her body. The hand clutching the knife brushed back a lock of fallen hair. LeChance stood slowly, facing the porch the entire time. "I'm looking for Dewey Jones," he shouted back. "He's not here. I don't know when he's coming back." In the short lull that followed, every instinct in his body told him to get back into the car and drive off. But where would he go? Angry, dark clouds spewing spears of lightning drew his attention to the western horizon. He looked back at the woman. She called out again. "He may be back tomorrow. There's a hotel about 25 miles north of here." LeChance hesitated and leaned against the open car door. He had already driven over 150 miles today, and with the waning light, was not anxious to get caught out in empty, unfamiliar country. The wind had started to pick up. He made a quick decision. "He told me to come today. I think I should probably wait." The woman turned her head to speak to the children, who went back inside, leaving her alone on the porch. She again faced the man and raised her arms in a shrug. "I'm sorry. I don't know when he's coming back," she repeated. The chant shifted his weight and looked back at the approaching clouds. The woman was clearly trying to hide fear, a fear that was understandable given the circumstances. A twinge in his gut told him to give her a break. "Thank you. I'll wait in the car." He sat back down in the driver's seat and closed the door. The woman stood for several seconds on the porch, then turned slowly and walked back inside. The chance leaned his head back against the headrest and closed his eyes. How long would he have to wait? His muscles ached for rest, and he slowly coaxed his body into relaxation. Distant growls of thunder broke the silence of the desert landscape. A sudden tapping at the window jerked him awake, and he reached instinctively for the Glock. The woman was standing at the car window in the ruffled apron, no longer holding the butcher knife. Her arms were folded across her chest, and her tight expression exposed her fear. He opened the window. "Whatever you have going with Dewey is your business, but please don't involve us. I have 3 little kids. We don't have anything." Her tough demeanor was betrayed by a tremble in her voice. The chance glanced at the car clock and realized he had been out for a half hour. He blinked his eyes and looked again at her. She looked terrified, but realized he was not going away and that she had no defense. She had seen the gun, now clenched in his right hand. He put the gun back down on the seat and pushed against the car door. She stepped back, more than a little guarded. The chance stood to face her. She was around 30 with shoulder-length dark hair and a boyish country look of jeans and a t-shirt under the apron's flowers. "I'm Lily," she said, offering her hand. Up close, LaChance saw that her eyes were a beautiful crystal green. "Hello," he said. He took her hand and looked into her face. A rush surged through his body as their hands and eyes met. Though he was reluctant to use his real name, he decided that it wouldn't matter. "My name is Jean. Please don't be nervous. I didn't know anyone else would be here. I promised to leave you and your children alone." The woman visibly relaxed and recrossed her arms gently. "Okay then," she said. "Okay, thank you." She turned away and started back toward the steps. He watched her go and felt badly for her. They were certainly isolated. He could never know how terrified she might be with him sitting outside. Almost to the steps, she stopped short, turned slowly, and started walking again to the car, her eyes focused on the ground. She stopped halfway to him and looked up. "Are you hungry?" "I'm just putting dinner on the table." The chance smiled slightly, and she returned the smile with a tilt of her head. "I'll eat outside if you like." Lily turned her head and looked out over the desert floor. Where was this going? Why was he here? The fright of seeing the gun had kicked her heart into high gear. She was certain the fear showed on her face. Her forehead was slick with sweat. The handsome stranger possessed a melodic accent, French most likely, or Canadian. He was soft-spoken and thoroughly polite, juxtaposed with all of the men who ran with Dewey. The man had misidentified Dewey's last name, which meant they weren't too well acquainted. It would be just like Dewey to use an alias, which would serve to complete his childish fantasy of the self-made outlaw, hiding out in the desert at the end of a lonely road. Lily was torn. If this man had not yet mentioned Dewey, would she have invited him in? Her own instincts were more reliable than Dewey's would ever be. She looked back at him, standing patiently, waiting for her reply. The tattered screen door was no defense against a gun. Besides, she wanted to keep an eye on him. She shook her head. No, that's ridiculous. I wasn't raised that way. You're here now, you might as well come in. He glanced through the window of the car at the bag in the back seat that held clothes, some money, and extra ammunition. Thank you. Dinner would be lovely. I'll be right in. She let out her breath in a long sigh and smiled tightly. Okay, she hesitated for a moment. Okay, she repeated and turned back to the house.